Good evening and welcome to DTV, the Democratic voice of community television here in East Tennessee. I'm Finbarr Saunders and I'm a member of the Knoxville City Council at large. Tonight we're going to take a nonpartisan look at what citizens in Knoxville and Knox County can expect from the city and county administrations as they decide how to spend your tax dollars and what are the needs in the coming year. What do the proposed budgets of 2017 and 18 focus on? What are the priorities for the year? What's the philosophy behind your putting these budgets together? Who better to discuss this subject than Mayor Mayors Rogero from the city of Knoxville and Mayor Tim Burchett from Knox County. So welcome, Mayor Rogero and Mayor Burchett. Those are the primary questions that we want to address tonight. You know, how did you establish the budget? What are your sources of revenue? What's the philosophy behind them? What are you focusing on this year? And then we'll talk, if we have time, about the capital budgets at the end. So, Mayor Rogero, you want to go first?
Well, first, thank you. I want to thank DTV for inviting me to be here today. It's always great to join our Knox County Mayor to talk about our city and county budgets and the work that we do together. And I want to thank you for your service on City Council.
Thank you. I enjoy it.
He's a great councilman.
Thank you also, Finbarr. I've been on every TV show on here. I've been on Wrestle Talk, and, I think that's probably the highest rated program maybe in the history of community television. No, all kidding aside, but you've been a great friend, and I appreciate your willingness to serve on council, and I live in the city, and also appreciate your service to our country, our Army. Thank you, brother. Vietnam veteran.
That's right.
Thank you.
Right.
Now you've embarrassed me. Okay.
Okay, so the budget.
The budget, here we go.
So each year when we put the budget together, it's like putting together a puzzle because there are many different needs. Of course, there are always limited resources, and we have to balance the different needs in the community, both what we see day in and day out, and also as we get requests from the community and from our council members to look at certain issues. The reality is that most of our budget is kind of set because it goes to because we are a service organization, most of our money goes to pay for employees, and most of those are police, fire, and public service. They provide the basic public safety and public services that people expect, whether it's police and fire protection, or having your brush and leaves picked up, filling potholes, repairing sidewalks, those basic services that everybody expects. Right. So that's the biggest part of the budget. And then we look at capital needs, infrastructure needs in the community, and we looked at issues such as equity. Is everybody, where are our most vulnerable communities, and how do we make sure that as the good times are happening, which right now we actually economically are in some good times here, as investments are being made, are the most vulnerable people also being assisted. And so that's why we do things like affordable housing. We're working together on the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center, which is we can talk about, which is a jail diversion program that we're both funding this year. So people with mental health issues or addiction issues, we divert them from jail if it's a minor offense, and if they are willing to address their issue, we can keep them out of jail and try to help them get help. So equity issues and capital issues are some of the biggest topics that we deal with.
Well, don't hesitate to mention the magnitude of the budget, the dollars.
Oh, sure. Well, I have to actually get this right. Our net budget is about almost $354 million.
Right. And ours is $798,165,102.
And a big portion of that goes directly to the schools.
Right, 62 cents, a little over. I appreciate you bringing that up. Something we both have to kind of remember is our flexibility in the budget. Our needs and wants, and the public's needs and wants are always fit in. But the schools receive 62 cents out of every dollar, and we've our finance team, I think Mayor Rogero would agree with me, the key is having good finance people. It is imperative, and I spent 16 years in the legislature and dealing with budgets upside down all sorts of ways, and we always, if you had good economic advisors, that was the way to go. But 62 cents out of every dollar goes to our education machine. I wish more of it went to the classroom, but I think we're working towards more of that now. the key to the whole thing, though, is we've had what's called an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, whereas in the past there's been a feud between the school system and the executive branch, which is our office. And so what we did was our finance people work with them, so we know their needs ahead of time, and they also know the economic outlook. You know, we work with Nashville closely and what we're expecting, and so there's not really any surprises. There's always a little give and take, Finbarr, as you well know, but generally we work it out, and the teachers have been great to work with, actually. That was something I was warned about, but you know, I come from a family of public educators, have a degree in education. My mama was a classroom teacher and Daddy was a long-term dean at University of Tennessee, so I understand where they're coming from, and we always seem to take them into consideration last, and we try to put them more front of the train than in the back, and so we work closely with them.
I think there's an interesting thing there when you're talking about education. Of course, as city taxpayers, we also pay county taxes.
Sure.
So 62 cents out of every dollar we pay in county taxes goes to the school. For the city itself, sales tax that we pay, and by state law, which you probably had something to do with, we have to devote 50% of that to the school system in the local county. We, in fact, devote, if I'm not mistaken, about 72 cents.
Yeah, 72, 73 cents
on
every sales tax
dollar. Of your sales tax dollars.
Of the sales tax dollars, yeah. So, in fact, we are big supporters of education. We think, and Mayor, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't be, that education is absolutely critical to our young people and to us as we get older and depend on young to support us through Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah, that's right. And even though there's not a line item in our budget for schools, and that's, in fact, as you said, 72, 73 cents of every sales tax dollar that we get goes to schools just right off the top. In addition, we support the schools through the Community Schools Initiative, which provides a place for the kids after school and an outreach to families, because we know our schools can't be successful if there are a lot of family issues that aren't properly addressed. We also focus on making neighborhoods safer around the schools, focusing on where there might be blight, removing it, helping improve the housing around the schools, sidewalks, street lights, things like that. So we're all very much committed to the kids and to our education.
And too, we work very close together. There's not a day goes by where she's usually taking shots at me on Twitter. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not.
Everybody knows it's the exact opposite.
No, we have a good time, but we do when issues come up and businesses come to town or things like that. We are close. We work very close together, and there's no. I can't think of any times in the last 6 or so years that we really had any disagreements, and on those times I've forgiven her, Finbarr.
I don't think I'll pursue
call
that.
him a time or two and say, I need to come talk to you.
I don't think
we always work things out.
We work it out.
We work it out.
From a philosophical approach, Mayor Rogero, I know you have some issues that you try to address every year as you put your budget together, and I am not familiar with Mayor Burchett's. I suspect they're not that dissimilar. So you want to talk just a moment about kind of how philosophically you begin to build this budget?
Right. Well, again, first we have the employees and their salaries, because we are a service organization, both the city and the county. And service organizations depend first and foremost on their employees. So a big portion of the budget goes to salaries and to benefits and to those services, as I mentioned, police, fire, and the public service. But we also look at where the needs are. And we know, we have learned over the years that when we strategically invest our public dollars in infrastructure, whether it's roads, sidewalks, street lights, parks, greenways, those public infrastructure enhancements strengthen our neighborhoods, and they promote private investment. An example is the Cumberland Avenue corridor. The city's put about $17 million into that streetscape, the reworking of those streets and beautification. We're already now at $210 million in private investment. I was saying 190 for a long time, but just last Friday, another $20 million investment was we were made aware of. So that's key for us to strengthen our community by investing public dollars, but in a way that we get a big return on the investment with the private dollars.
Well, I know the county does a lot of similar things on a little different basis outside the city limits, especially with the health department, with the libraries, and so forth.
Our health department, when I took office, oddly enough, I remember there were some folks that were critical of this area of what were we doing. And when I took office, we were putting over $5 million a year just in indigent care alone. And there's nobody the size of this community that does that. We have a very generous community, and folks we take care of our own. And and two, when we form a budget, there's always the give and take. But I've become more of, I guess, a libertarian. I'm just a less and less of government and more personal responsibility person. And with that, and that sort of. And the departments know that when they go into that, and they know my feelings about certain issues. So we don't usually, and I'm sure they do with the city too. Mayor Rogero is very outspoken, and what she believes in, and that reflects in her budget, and it should, and that's why she was reelected. I guess unopposed, weren't you? So
unopposed on the ballot.
Yeah. So and so was I. So I think people understand that and they respect that. So I think that works very well when we go into the budgetary process.
It obviously has. Speaking of that, the sources of revenue for both the city and the county. Tell me a little bit about where we are this year. Obviously, there has been no tax increase on either the city or the county's part, but kind of where you see this going, this economy, and what's going on in our local economy.
I come from, of course, 16 years in Nashville. I think I cut ahead of you. I apologize.
That's quite all right.
But when we formed the budget, we always talk, when I was in the legislature, we used to talk about the high highs and the low lows. In Tennessee, when the economy in the rest of the country is going this direction, Tennessee is usually just under that, is fairly stable, but on the uptick. And when it's on the downward trend, Tennessee is still fairly stable. And we have to realize that, and we don't get too far ahead of ourselves when the economy comes. In the good times is when I worry the most, Finbarr, because I can remember in Nashville when we were in several different budget crises, they were always preceded by a good time. And I can remember one time in particular, we were formulating our budget, and we brought in the economists, and they bring in three: a conservative, a liberal, and then a moderate. And we usually went with the moderate. And it was an election year, and they were trying to get the multiplier for the increase, what we figured it was going to be, and it didn't meet the needs that we had. So they called a recess, and we went in the back, and the guy asked me if I had a calculator, and I said, yeah, I do. And he says, figure this up, and it says whatever percentage of growth. And that was the percentage of growth that it balanced the budget. And he said, that's our number. And we went back, and I was the young man on the thing. I was just sort of in awe. But fortunately, our economy rose to that occasion, which we don't. Mayor Rogero and I don't always have that luxury.
So our biggest source of revenue for our city budget are city property taxes, and that's the biggest percentage in terms of our budget. They continue to rise, but it's modest. The larger tax increases this coming year are projected for sales tax, but again, that can go up or down.
Right.
And so even though the times may be good in some ways in terms of our projected revenues, we want to keep our operating expenses as flat or just slow growth on those as much as possible, because those are the expenses year in and year out that you have to meet. So if you have a good year, you don't want to all of a sudden raise your operating expenses drastically, because you may not be able to meet that next year. So those we're very careful about. When we have additional dollars due to additional revenues, perhaps unexpected revenues, that's where we focus on capital, one-time expenses. And that's how we're able to make a lot of the capital improvements that we have been doing and what we have now announced for the coming year.
Yeah, actually, I think when we look at the economy here locally, a lot of people think if they look at the national situation that things are not so good. In fact, here locally, we've been pretty stable, and we've had a decent growth. I think that's reflected in certainly the physical growth in the county and the physical growth in the city. And then that is reflected in the revenue whether it's sales tax or property tax. An issue you mentioned just a moment ago, the behavioral center that's new, the so-called safety center that we've talked about for almost 10 years. We finally have gotten that going. And I know, Mayor Burchett, you have some great interest in that. As a matter of fact, both mayors do. And you all have both been very supportive. Thank you. This is, I think it's absolutely vital. You want to talk just a moment about?
So I'll start. It's a county-led project with support from the city.
Right.
And the reason is that we have, the reason why we are doing this is that there are a lot of people who we end up arresting for minor offenses that are really caused by mental illness or by drug addiction. And we know that we are, not only are we wasting their time and that they will never improve if they just get put in jail, we're also utilizing, it's expensive to have somebody in jail. You have to have guards and all of the expenses that go with running a jail facility. It's not cheap. So we know that we do the best thing for the people if they, who are affected, if they are given the opportunity to seek treatment. And so this is something that we've worked on together, and we believe that we have a program that will work, that we are rolling out this year. Both of us are funding it in our budgets. And we will be monitoring it to make sure that it is successful. If we need to make adjustments as we go along, we will. But we're pleased that we've come to this point where we can offer this diversion to those with those problems in the hopes that they will get the services they need. It's big. It's a part of a bigger effort to address, as I mentioned earlier, those who are most vulnerable in our community. The Indigent Care Fund, all of the homelessness resources that the city provides, all of these together, they're actually working together towards a plan to meet the needs of people who have these issues, but also in a way that makes them accountable. And I think that's a key point that you mentioned earlier, Mayor Burchett.
Well, I came about it pretty, I guess, organically. I was a legislator, and really the mentally ill folks don't have a lobbyist. I mean, they have lobbyists down in Nashville but you can't compete with what's going on in Nashville or in Washington. The dollars aren't there, obviously. And a good friend, he is one of my best friends, who recently just qualified for a home loan. So he went through but the problem is that not every mentally ill person has their best friend as a state senator or a county mayor, or a city mayor. And these people just fall through the cracks. And I was talking to the sheriff and former Attorney General Randy Nichols this morning. I believe they told me that there's 30 folks that account for 600 arrests a year.
So this should take a little pressure off the...
Yeah, the overcrowding issue too. But the thing is Finbarr, these folks are not criminals. They have a voice inside their head that tells them to break into a car or something. They're not violent. They're not, they're standing on a street corner yelling at people. We had a young man lose his life just recently in Knoxville that was one of those type of folks. And they're not, as someone said, our rejects. They're our husbands or wives and fathers and mothers, daughters. And these are just citizens that we should take care for, and we're making that effort. And it's really a collaborative between the city and the county and the state. I mean, Mayor Rogero and I had said earlier, if the state wasn't coming along, we were going to figure out how to do it, and we did it. And the state has come along with some funding also. And I think it will be a model for the rest of the state. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to address the entire mental health issue. But if we're going to continue to, I mean, if you want to see the mental health in our state right now, just drive under a bridge. I mean, that is, I'm going to be blunt about it. And the #1 mental health hospital, the largest mental health hospital in the state of Tennessee, is the Shelby County Jail. #2 is Davidson County. #3 is Knox County. And that's an indictment upon us.
Yeah, and so we're beginning to address that. Thank you. And thank you all both for supporting that effort. I think it's obviously time to do it. Now, switching a little bit to capital budgets. In the city, I know a huge issue has been, at least we hear about it, sidewalks. So I know in this year's budget, you have really stepped up and made some efforts to begin to address that in a much more heavier way, at least for 1 year. Yes, sir.
Right. So sidewalks are a big issue in our community.
Yeah, boy.
It fits in with our complete streets policy, which is to make sure that as we are building new streets or rebuilding our streets, that they work both for vehicles, for bikes, for transit, and for pedestrians. And we have a list of requests over the years that neighborhoods submit to us for sidewalks.
Yeah.
And they're all very much needed, but
Sure.
sidewalks are very expensive to add in later. So so when we're building a street or rebuilding a street, we go ahead and take care of the sidewalks, but there are a lot of spaces that aren't part of a larger redevelopment project. So what I have done this year is quadruple the amount of dollars that brings it up to almost $3 million.
Actually, a little over $3 million when you add the rebuilding of the.
Oh, yes,
so
yes,
it's
exactly.
almost $4 million when you add the.
Right, when you add all the sidewalk dollars in.
Yeah.
So we will have $3 to $4 million, depending on how you what a line item you pull from, for sidewalks. But we also are putting some money aside to bring in some help to really evaluate where the need is. You know, the list that we have, it's where people have said we want a sidewalk. But we really need to look at this more comprehensively, like we have with our greenway corridors and our bike lanes, and really look at where are the most, prioritize the areas where we need to start first. And it's my intention through the remaining 2 budgets that I'll have to have the study and then to fund the priorities identified in the study. After the study will be part of a much larger public process, so everyone will have some input on it. And then just like the Greenway plan, it's a 20-year plan, the Greenway Connecting Plan.
Right.
20 years, $45 million plan. We'll do what we can through my administration, then we'll hand the baton off to the next mayor and hope that person will carry on.
Well, that particular
Same thing with
plan,
the sidewalks.
Interfaces well with the county parks and rec as greenways occur there, and we try to make those connections to make sure that we have a massive greenway. And you may want to comment on that.
Well, actually, I was going to say $750,000 in this budget is currently for the BMX track that's in South Knoxville.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to play well, I think, into all the
With the urban wilderness.
urban wilderness and the bicycle trails and tracks over there. It's pretty exciting. BMX, the thing that when we pushed on it's bicycle motocross. Folks in South Knoxville don't call me and say you're going to put a motorcycle track in. Although I think that'd be pretty cool. I would love to see that.
Out there.
I would be out there, but they said I could ride in my old antique bicycle. I said it's got more metal in it than a Saturn automobile does, because it's a clunker. But anyway, all that's going to work together. We had $36.9 million in our capital improvement plan. $10 million of that, of course, for schools, plus an additional $5.8 million to finish out our Gibbs Middle School and the roads that are around Hardin Valley, and a little over $4 million in capital outlay for the Sheriff's Department. That's, I believe, 45 new cars and body cameras and some other things like that. So,
I think both budgets actually complement one another. You all have done some things, and we obviously work well together, which is
Well,
And that's not by accident.
No, it's not.
Our finance folks communicate, so we know as we are putting our plan together, our finance people and our different staff are communicating so that where we can coordinate, where we can build upon each other's budget, we want to get the most out of the resources that we have. So it's a good relationship.
Yeah, and that's obvious. And I hope it's obvious to the citizenry that watches and receives the incredible benefits of being a citizen in this community, not just the city, but outside the city and the county. So, and the county's responsibility with the schools is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. You've got a new superintendent this year, and I assume there will be an equally good working relationship as you've had with Buzz Thomas for all
Buzz was great. Buzz was great to work with. A lot of people encouraged him to stay on, but he chose otherwise. But the memorandum of understanding will kind of continue on, I hope. I think it's a great framework for us to work. We don't need to be at odds or at each other's throats, and it works really well for everybody. And two, we can kind of benefit from their finance folks, and they can benefit from ours. And also when issues come up, like in Nashville or something, and when we're down there, we can help them work on those issues too. We have to go before the legislature.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, these two budgets do kind of intertwine amongst each other, and the benefits or the services that the city provides are complemented by the ones the county provides, like the library and like the health department that we spoke about earlier.
Yes, sir.
The sheriff's department primarily takes care of the jail, but they also do a lot of policing outside the city.
Well, yeah, that's their major function, of course, is outside of the
Right.
well, and they're in jurisdiction. They work, and too. Our police chief and our sheriff work very well.
Yeah.
Chief Roush is top notch. I was with him this weekend at a first responders event, and he and our sheriff J.J. Jones work very well together. Those things that happened in years past, those are years past. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I think we're actually very fortunate because both departments are staffed at a very professional level. The Knoxville Police Department right now is conducting a training class, and I think they're
We have a new academy, right?
35
or so.
35,
Yeah.
yeah, I met a good many of them the other day. Speaking back to the open streets things you mentioned a moment ago, if you missed it last Sunday, there was an open street on Magnolia.
Right.
It was fantastic. And there were a lot of young people there, a lot of people from every part of town there. It was just a fantastic
It's
event.
the fourth Open
Yeah,
Streets
yeah,
event
yeah.
that we've had, along with Bike Walk Knoxville, and
Yeah.
so each of them have been a big success.
Yeah. And there's more and more bikeable areas outside the city limit now.
Absolutely.
So this
Of course, I live in the city, and I always remind the bikers, I say, y'all are, I want you there, but obey the rules. I always get nervous every time I see there's a guy in my neighborhood. He always runs through the stop signs. I think,
Yeah.
brother, that's dangerous, so please be careful.
That's dangerous. Yeah, that's really dangerous.
We might want to talk about affordable housing.
Yeah, let's talk about that for just a moment.
Just want to make sure
We got a
folks
couple minutes
understand.
left.
One of the economy is going so well here that many of the apartment complexes that were formerly subsidized, that had received some assistance, federal assistance, number of 10, 15 years ago, as their time period expires, they have an option to go to market rate or to rehab and to continue to be affordable housing. Many of them are selecting to go to market rate because there's a demand for that, which of course it's good to have a strong economy like that, but it means that there are fewer houses available. So we see a major need for more affordable housing, and our CDBG and our home dollars, which are federal dollars, they are used for that purpose to leverage some private investment, but those keep going down. I think y'all have had the same thing. And so this year in our budget, I proposed a $2 million affordable housing fund, which will be used to fill that gap between the private equity and the bank financing, so that the private sector can come in and build more rental housing for us.
And that's an incredible effort. I know that not only helps the city, but it helps the county, because not everybody lives inside the city. And then our public transportation service, which right now only provides service within the city limits, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we're glad to extend it when the county wants to pay for it.
Well, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, yeah.
You left me hanging.
We're open to it, absolutely. Another piece of the affordable housing is we're putting about $2.3 million into KCDC, their project at Walter P. Taylor Homes, so that so they can continue their revitalization.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of good things going on, but time is drawing to a close, and I want to thank you all so much for coming and engage in this, what I've considered to be a very informative discussion. I hope the viewers agree with that as well. I do want to invite people to not only watch this show, but same station next week on Democratic TV. But thank you so much, and good evening.
Thanks, Finbarr.
Thank you.